It's One-on-One with Mark Allen on Thief River Falls Radio, and today's guest is Cal Soderquist with the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Minnesota Lynx. He is executive producer and also studio host. And Cal, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mark. Happy to be here.
We're going to talk about a few things about Lynx and season, Timberwolves, and what has happened with the season and what's going on, and a little about that. But before we jump into that, we kind of want to find out a little bit about Cal. Tell us a little bit about where you're from and what got you into the broadcasting end here.
Yeah, sure. So I've actually grown up a Timberwolves fan. I'm from here in Minnesota, in the Twin Cities, just north of Minneapolis, in the Blaine suburb. I went to school here as well at the University of St. Thomas and St. Paul, and that's sort of how I got started with the Timberwolves and Lynx. I jumped on board via an internship which lasted a couple of years, and got to work very closely with both John Folke and Alan Horton, who I'm sure your listeners recognize both of those names. And eventually I was able to sort of turn that role into a full-time job with the Timberwolves and Lynx, and got to do a lot of stuff, especially in the summers with the Lynx broadcast team when John Folke, who was the Timberwolves executive producer and studio host, he would then become the play-by-play guy for the Lynx. And I would get to slide into some more of those hosting roles for Lynx games. And just last year, for the Timberwolves season, John was actually able to take a role in Charlotte. He's now the official play-by-play voice of the Hornets. So that, again, sort of allowed me to slide in and take on some of his duties that he previously held. So it's been a lot of fun. You know, like many people, I grew up following sports very closely and playing sports as well, but also even just getting excited with some of the behind-the-scenes stuff. You know, I really had my favorite broadcasters. I would love to listen to games on the radio as much or even maybe more than watching them. And sort of I knew even very early on that I wanted to try to find a way to make a living working in sports, you know, whether that was broadcasting or even marketing. There are so many different avenues that can keep you sort of involved in and connected to, you know, teams or some of the networks that cover these teams in the games. And so I just knew that was probably going to be something that I would gravitate toward very, very early on. And I've been, you know, very, very lucky and fortunate to get some of the opportunities that I have, both as a student in St. Paul. I did a lot of student broadcasting for our teams there. It's a Division III school, so I got to get a lot of experience there that maybe others don't always get on a college campus. And then equally, you know, with the opportunities at the Timberwolves, I was able to learn a lot in those roles early on as well.
You've been able to see success with the Minnesota Lynx program in past years, but Timberwolves, a different story. It's been a bit of a struggle, hasn't it?
It certainly has. And, you know, you really have to find different things to focus on than the wins and losses. Yes, certainly it's easier to come to work each morning after, you know, a thrilling victory or a buzzer beater. There have been moments like that. And I will say of that Lynx team, it wasn't just the wins and the success they had, but even some of the players and getting to cover them. We've heard so much, especially lately, about Maya Moore and some of the things she's doing in criminal justice reform, but even just as players and their willingness to speak with the media and kind of allow you to cover them in the way that you want to. And yes, there certainly have been some lean seasons with the Wolves, but, you know, there were always colorful characters as far as guys that were a ton of fun to cover. Michael Beasley was one of the guys that really was always good for a great quote in the locker room. Always kind of had a very lighthearted, playful approach to, you know, practices, shoot-arounds, and even in games. So you would find guys like that you kind of, you know, you weren't hanging with every victory or every defeat. You were more so, you know, we just had a great feature on this guy. Let's hope that he has a great game tonight, that kind of thing. And their backgrounds are really cool, and some of the things they've had to overcome in their lives
Cal, different times we're living in right now, obviously, and we're hoping that the Lynx might have a season here. Timberwolves, of course, won't have anything going into the playoffs, but I mean, we just live at a different time when these types of people, athletes, will speak out on what's going on in the world. And as somebody who talks to these people, what kind of sense are you getting from them in the changing of our society the way it is, and how they approach as somebody to look up to, as somebody who's going to be in the media to say things? Are you getting a sense that they want to get out and say things, and or how much do we pay attention to what they say?
Yeah, it's a great conversation, and I think even over the last few years, we've seen players both with the Wolves and the Lynx, and really in those leagues, especially the NBA and the WNBA. I think those leagues, from their leadership, they're so encouraging and approving of these players using their platforms for issues and items that they feel are important. And then obviously a lot of this has been accelerated, unfortunately, because of some of the tragic events we've had here, both in Minneapolis and then around the country. But I do think it's great to see these players get comfortable in this role. And, whether they're also now more than ever, even it's so different from 5, 7, 10 years ago as far as the ability for a player to reach their audience via social media, via live streams. They can release quotes via their agency. They can get out in the community. So to find these guys to see these guys find their voice, I guess, is a way to put it. It's been really cool. And you can tell that these guys are passionate about it. I think of Karl Anthony Towns is someone who basically, since he's been in the league, has not really been shy about speaking out on certain issues and what he feels is right and wrong. And it's been very fun to watch him even sort of grow into that role as he's become older, and also within that Wolves team, he's kind of become more of the de facto leader and one of the longer tenured veterans now. But you could find examples of that, throughout these two franchises, really, with some of the players that are either here now or have been here. Players recognize, too, the importance of it, and that a lot of young boys and girls and sort of impressionable people are going to be following these players very closely.
Finally, what about the Lynx season? We understand there's not going to be a broadcast for the Lynx season this year, or what's up for the Minnesota Lynx?
Yeah, it's the unfortunate deal of, and like you said, we're all kind of dealing with this new normal. It's unprecedented. We'll be watching very closely the NBA's restart and sort of their bubble environment in Orlando, even though the Timberwolves won't be involved. And then the WNBA is going to have a very similar thing as far as they're going to try to create that, safer environment. It's not going to be completely safe, and I think players and coaches and everyone recognizes that. But they're also going to be in Florida, in Bradenton, where there are sort of a similar complex layout. There's hotels nearby. There's lots of courts or arenas to get games played on, sort of at a high frequency over a number of days and weeks. Super excited to see both of these leagues come back, and I think everyone's going to be fun to have some excited and happy to see some basketball back on our TVs again. It does mean that locally here, we will not, for the first time in, I don't even know how many years consecutively off the top of my head that we've had Lynx basketball on radio here in the Twin Cities. It's been since I've worked here, and we've been one of the only teams that does every home and every road game. But during a situation like this, it makes a lot more sense logistically to let sort of the league and the national broadcast partners kind of take the lead on, producing these games, both for obviously TV, and then I'm sure there will be some national radio, and also the league has a, sort of a league pass, or just like the NFL has Sunday tickets, the WNBA has a league pass live access subscriber-based option that will give you access to every game. But we will not get to do those games down in Florida this year. We are still going to have a lot of unique coverage that we're going to try to execute as best we can remotely, with phone conversations and weekly podcasts, players interviewing one another while they're there on site. But we will not have the traditional game broadcast for each matchup. So certainly that's something that we're bummed about, but at the same time we understand it.
Cal, I appreciate you taking some time to visit with us one-on-one here on Thief River Falls Radio, and best of luck in your future too. Thanks, Cal.
Yes, thank you, Mark. Anytime.
Cal Soderquist, and that is your one-on-one with Mark Allen on Thief River Falls Radio.